an open night where you can talk and ask all those strange questions which you don't have answers for, and which everyone's asked before, so no question is a dumb question, because if you're new to astronomy, you'll have a lot of them. Alright, I think we'll just move on now to our guest speaker. John Natasio, you're going to speak. He's a professor from the Physics and Astronomy from Monash. I was told not to say Latrobe. From Monash University, the only place where you do real science. Ooh, I'm going to cop something after. Anyway, his talk is on what we have learned from Apollo 11. Now, John's going to speak from his computer, where he's going to massage his talk while he sits there. So, without further ado, we will hand it over to John and wish him welcome.
Do I need the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay,
Switch it on.
Switch it on?
Switch it up. Switch up.
Okay, got it. So I'll try and run through this in reasonable time. It usually goes a bit over, but I believe Perry's next, so it doesn't really matter. In the early 60s, the USSR dominated everything in space. They had the first satellite, first person into orbit, dogs, first spacecraft to Venus. They had just about everything. In fact, at one stage, they had so many animals had orbited the Earth that one NASA engineer said that it was the herd shot around the world, which I thought was rather clever. So, to try and correct that, President Kennedy asked his Vice President, Lyndon Johnson, to do something about it. And they concluded they were in a race with no defined end point. And so the best thing to do was to define the end point. And it had to be sufficiently far advanced to where the USSR was that any current advantage they had was negligible. If you don't have a defined end point, then everything that they do before you seems like a victory. If you have a defined end point, then everything that they do before you is irrelevant because they haven't got to the end yet. So that was the logic. Going to the moon was a goal that was way beyond anything available at the time. They didn't have a rocket that was anywhere close to the requirements. Of course, these promises were made when the US had precisely 15 minutes of experience in space and not even in orbit. So when Kennedy was making these promises, there was a reasonable amount of luck expected. So we all know how to get to the... Is that echo driving everyone else's mad as me?
If I talk like this, can you hear me? No? Not really? Okay. Do you want the echo or do you want to not hear me? Echo. Right. Echo.
So we all know that the way to get to the rocket, get to the moon, is to build a big rocket which takes off from the Earth, goes to the moon, lands on the moon, takes returns to the Earth. Except that turns out to be a very bad way of doing it. This is what NASA called direct descent, and the landing part has to include a heavy shield for re-entry. That has to land on the moon, then it's got to be lifted off the moon again. You need fuel for leaving lunar orbit. That's got to be landed on the moon and lifted off the moon. This is extremely wasteful, and it means that you need a really big engine for descent to the moon, because you've got to slow everything down. And estimates were that the rocket landing on the moon was going to be 25 metres tall, and the rocket launching it from the Earth was going to be truly enormous. In fact, the rocket was going to be called Nova, and that was a problem. They realised they'd probably never build it in time to meet Kennedy's deadline. So alternatives were needed. One of the alternatives was called Earth Orbit Rendezvous. The idea here was to launch a number of smaller rockets. That's relatively easy. Then you assemble your spacecraft in space, and then that of course relies on the ability to rendezvous in orbit, and then you send the spacecraft to the moon. And of course, one launch failure means that the whole mission is dead, and many launches will be needed. And you still have many of the problems of direct descent. When you get to the moon, you've still got to land, you've got to take off from the moon and bring everything back. Then there was the idea of lunar orbit rendezvous, which was initially considered quite crazy. The idea is that a single rocket leaves the Earth, goes into orbit around the moon, a separate lander then ferries people astronauts onto the moon, part of the lander returns to the mothership, which then returns to the Earth. So the pros of this, you reduce your weight a lot. The heat shield doesn't land on the moon. The return fuel and the engine doesn't land on the moon. Less weight means probably you can get by with one launch from the Earth, and you can do that with a much smaller booster, which is the rocket scientist word for rocket. You can do that with a much smaller booster than the Nova, and you can make a specialised lunar landing. The disadvantage is rendezvous around the moon was considered crazy. If something goes wrong, there's no chance of rescue. You need an extra pressurised crew compartment. You need an extra guidance and control system. One's going to land on the moon, one's going to get you to and from the moon. You need an extra power supply, you need an extra propulsion system. You need two of everything that you seem to somehow be able to save weight. A lot of people didn't believe this. Another pro, of course, is that you do have a backup life support system in the event of a catastrophic failure, which happened on Apollo 13. So John Hobart at Langley Research Centre was the person who was convinced of the lunar orbit rendezvous approach. And that eventually won. The weight advantage was significant. And one Saturn V could do it. Could also be done quickly, and it was a lot cheaper. A specialised lunar lander was a huge simplification. And the Space Task Group concluded that the business of landing a thing on the moon really didn't have a satisfactory answer. It was really way too hard. So a separate vehicle for landing was the way to go. So here, this is the mission profile. You take off from here, you get rid of everything except the command and service module and the lunar module. That goes to the moon. Command and service module stays in orbit. Lunar module lands. Top half of the lunar module comes back, docks with the command and service module. You return to the Earth. You jettison the service module, and the command module lands on the moon. There's also a Monash connection. Joe Monahan in mathematics, who I worked with for a number of years, invented a technique called SPH, smooth particle hydrodynamics, and one of the first connections was to work on the collision theory of the moon's formation, where something about the size of Mars collides with the Earth. So this was work that was first done at Monash using a technique invented at Monash. So preparations for Apollo. Now I was just a kid, and I didn't realise that Gemini was preparations for Apollo. Everything that Gemini did was to prove that Apollo could work. When people said to John Hubble, you can't, what about rendezvous? You can't rendezvous around the moon. He said, you've got to rendezvous somewhere, or we're not going to the moon. If you can do it in Earth orbit, you can do it in moon orbit. So he just considered that a problem that had to be solved. So you had to master rendezvous, you had to master docking, actually connecting spacecraft. You had to master spacewalks and activities outside the spacecraft. You had to understand the effect of weightlessness and for long flights. So that was Project Gemini. This is the Mercury capsule with one astronaut compared to the Gemini capsule. Okay, so what machines do you need for a lunar landing? First of all, you need a booster, the Saturn V, which is still the most powerful rocket ever built. It's 110 metres tall, had 3 stages. It only produced 4 Gs at liftoff. The Gemini Titan was 7 Gs, and apparently the astronauts called this the old man spacecraft because 4 Gs even an old man could take. It was the first booster built purely for civilian purposes, and it had a 100% success rate, by which we mean the only failure was not catastrophic and it still got into orbit. So here it is, 5 F1 engines, each one burning 3 tonnes of fuel per second. That's the most powerful machine ever built. It's a pretty stunning figure when you think about it. 15 tonnes of fuel per second for about a minute and a half. And here it is, this is 110 metres, this part. So this is half a kilometre of flame shooting out the back. So pretty impressive machine. Okay, here's some relative sizes. This is the Mercury Redstone, which was used for the suborbital Mercury flights. This is the Mercury Atlas, which was used for the orbital flights. This is the Gemini Titan, and this is the Saturn V. I mean, it really was an order of magnitude more complex than anything that had been built that far. So now, getting to the point, taking people to the moon, the Apollo spacecraft was 3 spacecraft: a service module, command module, and a lunar module. Command and service module has to house the 3 astronauts who've got to feed water and protect them for over a week, travel 500,000 miles. You need a reliable engine. This engine here has got to fire to go into lunar orbit insertion. So it gets to the moon, then it's got to fire to slow them down, and then it's got to fire again to bring them back to the Earth, which is called trans-Earth injection. So it's got to be completely reliable. So there's a separate command module. This is the part with the people in it. This is the service module, which has all the life support and fuel. And then there's the SPS engine, the service propulsion system. So this is the command module. This 2 metre tall part here, that's the only part that returns, this part here. So I've got 110 metres high and 2 metres comes back. If you want to have a go at driving it, this is the controls inside. And this is where the 3 astronauts would sit. This is the service module. It contains these RCS, the reactive control system. That's for orienting the spacecraft. This is the big engine which gets you to and from the moon, slows you down, etc. And inside the service module there are fuel cells. There are 3 fuel cells. There. They take liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, add them together to make water, heat and electricity. There are 2 hydrogen tanks and there are 2 oxygen tanks. Except after Apollo 13 there were 3. Okay, so here's the SPS engine. It had to be a restartable engine and it had to be 100% reliable. To make it reliable, they use hypergolic fuel, which means fuel that ignites on contact. So you don't have to worry about an ignition source that could go wrong. You also don't have a pump, because a pump might go wrong. So you have pressurised helium that you pump in, which then pumps the fuel out into the engine. Now the lunar module was a true spacecraft. It's not aerodynamic at all, that's why it's got bits and lumps sticking off it in different areas. It was built by Grumman and it was always behind schedule and always overweight. At one stage Grumman were offering, I think, $100,000 per pound for any ideas that would shave weight off the lunar module. So it has an ascent stage and a descent stage. So the whole thing lands on the moon and then you leave as much behind as possible and the ascent stage returns. The descent engine had to have a variable throttle. You're going to be slowing down to land on the moon. You've got to be able to adjust the throttle. It was the first spacecraft to have a variable throttle. Until then, you turned them on until they ran out of fuel and then they were off. So this one had to be adjustable. Again, it used hypergolic fuel, and this engine had to be reliable. If this engine didn't work, you had 2 astronauts dying on the moon. And they were able to get this down to 4 moving parts, which is pretty impressive, I thought. And it had life support for 2 people for a few hours, which became a few days on later missions. The main problem with the lunar module was always weight. It originally had 5 legs, because 5 is more stable than 4. That was cut down to 4 for weight. It used to have 4 windows, that was cut down to 2. You don't pressurise the descent stage to try and save weight. You cover it with Kapton foil, which gives you thermal protection and micrometeorite protection. You just do whatever you can to get rid of the weight. This is where the seats would have been if there were seats. If there are no seats, they have to stand. This is a view from inside. Now the lunar module was sometimes called the aluminium balloon because when it was pressurised, they said you could actually see it visibly bulge. There were some places where it was as thin as 3 sheets of aluminium foil, and occasionally when a screwdriver was dropped it would fall straight through the floor. It could not support its own weight on Earth. Of course it didn't have to support its own weight on Earth, it only had to support its own weight on the moon. When the first lunar module was delivered, NASA called it junk and garbage and refused to take delivery. They found over 200 faults in it and sent it back. That's the reason that Apollo 8 went to the moon. Apollo 8 was meant to be a test of the lunar module in orbit. The lunar module wasn't ready, so they sent Apollo 8 to the moon, and Apollo 9 tested the lunar module in orbit. Since each machine was essentially hand-built, everyone who worked on it signed a poster. The poster was photographed and attached to the leg on the descent stage, and that's still on the moon for each of the lunar modules that went there. You then pack them all into the top half of the Saturn V, and here's a little video showing you how they extract the lunar module. I believe this took about an hour and a half. This has been sped up a little bit. They're the RCS, Reaction Control System. They're also called quads because they've got there are 4 of them, and they've also got 4 nozzles. So it's something I'm going to play in a minute. You'll hear them refer to the quads. Okay, so that's how you get everything out. Now, when in preparing for this, I read a quote from the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and they said that not the science and not the technology, the greatest achievement of the Apollo program was getting 250,000 people to work towards a common goal. And part of that was mission control. I was most impressed with how mission control worked. So basically they have to be prepared for anything, and there has to be a strict hierarchy and strict procedures. So this is how it works. You've got big screens at the front because it's not serious without big screens. All of these people here are called flight controllers, and in the middle is the flight director. Now if you were to stand here and look in this direction, you would see this view. And each desk has got a name. This is where the guidance officer sat, that's Guido. The flight dynamics officer would be Fido, etc., etc. And if you were to look from over here, you would see that view. Okay? So the flight controller has a specific spacecraft system, and the flight director is in charge. This is Gene Kranz, the most famous of the flight directors. Interestingly, the spacecraft talks to only one person, and that's Capcom, capsule communicator. Capcom was an astronaut. He was a backup astronaut. I say he because they were all men at this stage. He was a backup astronaut from the crew, and he was the only one who could talk to the crew. Everyone else could talk amongst themselves, but then they had to ask Capcom to send a message to the spacecraft. The others could hear the spacecraft, but they couldn't talk to it. The flight director's job description is pretty simple. Take any action necessary for crew safety, vehicle safety, and mission success in that order. Okay, so here are the different people. I haven't got time to go through those. So, as I said, the spacecraft hears only Capcom. They don't hear any of the controls. All of the flight controls are on one audio loop that goes through the flight director, also known as flight for short. And the controllers inform flight of everything that he needs to know to make a decision. And go, no-go decisions are made by all. Usually one no-go will veto the next phase, but that decision is ultimately made by the flight director, and then he will ask Capcom to tell the astronauts what they think about what to do. Each flight controller is supported by a room full of people known as the back room. And they answer questions from the controller. So if the controller has a question they don't know, they're on a separate audio loop to the back room. And those people have the phone numbers of the people who designed, manufactured and assembled each system. So they can go right down to the person who screwed it into place if they need to. And in Apollo 13 they needed to. Gene Kranz said, I want you to get in touch with everybody. I want to know what these systems can do, not what they were designed to do. Because we're going to need to push them to breaking point. So I'm going to play you a little bit of audio from 2 minutes after the Apollo 13 explosion. On one channel, I'm not sure which one it is, but you'll hear the flight director's audio loop. And on the other channel, you'll hear the Apollo 13 astronauts talking to Capcom. You'll hear things like flight guido, and that means I want to talk to the flight director, and this is the guidance officer here. And he will usually answer and say, go ahead, guide, unless he's busy. You'll also hear Jim Lovell referring to Ray and barber pole. This is a nice analogue system for telling you what's happening. This is a part of the command module control. This is a command module reaction control system power plant. And you can see these are grey flags. That means the system's operating normally. These are barber poles, which means it's abnormal or an unknown error. So, over here, I've written down here what's happening just to try and make some of their terminology a little bit less opaque. and on both sides. So with any luck when I hit this, it'll play.
And Houston, we had a restart on our computer. We had a pink light and the restart reset. Roger, restart.
So that's Capcom on the right.
Restart on the pink reset. And I'm looking at our service module RCS helium-1. We have B as barber pole and D as barber pole. Helium-2, D as barber pole. And secondary propellants, I have A and C barber pole. Tmac temperatures. Okay, AC2 is showing zip. I'm trying to reconfigure on that, Jack. Roger. Yeah, we got a main bus A undervolt now too, Sean. Main A undervolt. Trade north 25.5. Main B's reading zip right now.
Fuel cell 1 and 3 are all online. You've got main bulb, there is no main bulb. Evidently, reconnect fuel cell. Fuel cell 1 to main A, fuel cell 3 to main B. Okay, fuel cell 1 back to main A, fuel cell 3 back to main B. Main A, 3 to main B. Let's see what happens. Do we have implementation? Well, we want it does appear we want DC bus 2 voltage. Main D is reading 4 volts, and that effectively takes AC away from us. Okay. One call on the fuel cell all the way to the line. You see that? Go ahead. I just want to help you with the
Houston, we'd like you to attempt to reconnect fuel cell 1 to main A and fuel cell 3 to main B. Verify that quad delta is open. Okay, Houston, I'm showing, I tried to reset and fuel cell 1 and 3 are both showing gray flags, but they're both showing zip on the flows.
I copy, right?
We copy.
Let me submit it on.
So unfortunately we're getting that in mono. The two channels are both coming through the one speaker, so it makes it a little bit harder to follow what's going on. I'll just skip that. The Apollo 1 fire was a really pivotal event. This was during a test of the command module on Earth. It was what was called a plugs out test. The idea was it operated on internal power only to see how everything was functioning. And in fact, some of Gus Grissom's last words were, how are we going to get to the moon if we can't talk between three buildings? They were having so much trouble. But they were in a pure oxygen environment, and the spacecraft was basically a disaster at that stage. And there was a spark and inevitably it exploded. Gene Kranz called all of the flight controllers in the next day, and his response has become known as the Kranz mantra, and it goes a lot like this. Spaceflight will never tolerate carelessness, incapacity and neglect. Somewhere, somehow we screwed up. Could have been in design, build or test. Whatever it was, we should have caught it. We were too gung-ho about the schedule and we looked out all the problems we saw each day in our work. Every element of the program was in trouble and so were we. The simulators were not working. Mission control was behind in virtually every area. Flight and test procedures changed daily. Nothing we did had any shelf life. But not one of us stood up and said, damn it, stop. I don't know what Thompson's committee will find as the cause, but I know the cause. We are the cause. We were not ready. We did not do our job. We were rolling the dice hoping things would come together by launch day when we knew in our hearts that it would take a miracle. From this day forward, flight control will be known by two words, tough and competent. Tough means we're forever accountable for what we do or what we fail to do. We will never again compromise our responsibilities. Competent means we will never take anything for granted. Mission control will be perfect. When you leave this meeting today, you'll go to your office and the first thing you'll do there is write tough and competent on your blackboard. It will never be erased. Each day when you enter that room, these words will remind you of the price paid by Grissom, White and Chaffee. These words are the price of admission to the ranks of mission control. And we get Scott Morrison. So NASA found over 8,000 problems with the command module. 1,697 changes were recommended and 1,341 alterations were made. NASA's safety officer Jerry Lederer said just before Apollo 8 took off that it had 5.6 million parts, most of them specially made. If everything functions with 99.99% reliability, we should expect 560 failures, which is not acceptable, of course. So, briefly, a little bit about the astronauts for Apollo 11. Neil Armstrong was the commander. He was actually the first civilian astronaut. He had been in the Navy. He was a civilian test pilot at the time. His application for the flight program was 2 weeks late, but it was considered he might make a good astronaut. Mike Collins has become my favourite astronaut. I always thought Jim Lovell was pretty good, but Mike Collins, the man's brilliant. He said he would rather read poetry than study differential equations. After Gemini 10, he said, I should have claimed a travel allowance. NASA was paying 7 cents per mile back then. That would have been $80,000. But someone tried that during Mercury and instead they were given a bill for one Atlas booster at $2 million. This is a video of Mike. He's now 89, I think, maybe 90 by now, talking about effective communication. He believes English is important. He wants to turn STEM into STEAM by adding English to it. And he's about to describe the story of Paradise Lost as related by someone who's trained in STEM compared to someone who's trained in STEAM.
In STEM, the plot of Paradise Lost is some guy, like he kind of, fell off like a cliff, and maybe it was like kind of, well, it was like maybe God pushed him. Okay, that's the plot of John Milton's Paradise Lost in STEM. Now in STEAM is
Him the almighty power hurled headlong flaming from the ethereal heights with hideous ruin and combustion, down to bottomless perdition, there to dwell in adamantine chains and penal fire who durst defy the omnipotent arms. That's the same sentence in STEAM. I think that English stuff's important, and so I would try to sneak that some steam into it down, that's all.
That guy's brilliant.
Apparently the Russian newspapers referred to Armstrong as the mission czar, and at one stage when a flight called Apollo 11 to talk to Armstrong, Collins responded, "The czar is brushing his teeth, can I help him?" I strongly recommend his book, Carrying the Fire. It's very good. Buzz Aldrin was the lunar module pilot, which don't think that means he was flying the lunar module, that would be too simple. Neil Armstrong was flying the lunar module. He was the first brother to two sisters, and the family called him Brother, and one sister pronounced it as Buzzer, and hence he was known as Buzz. He did a DSc, Doctor of Science, not a PhD at MIT, on line of sight guidance techniques for man-orbital rendezvous, so the astronauts all called him Dr. Rendezvous. And you can see his thesis online if you look for it. And you should never tell him that the moon landing is a hoax.
Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon? Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon? You tell him to get out of here. This is a call the police. We can't. There's one in here. We'll call the police. Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon? It doesn't, sir. I have nothing to do with this. Okay. You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black if ever thought of saying a misrepresentative away from me. You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
Fantastic, I could watch that all day. So the Apollo computers were built by MIT. This is Margaret Hamilton, who was the director of the software engineering division. Here she is at the time standing in front of the printout, the software. The Apollo guidance computer will be quite important when we finally get to the last few minutes. The operating system is called the Executive. It could run 8 simultaneous tasks, not simultaneous in the sense of parallel processing, but in the sense of swapping stuff in and out of memory rapidly. The lunar module could run 7. Each new task was assigned a core set by the Executive based on its priority, and tasks finished sufficiently quickly that they figured that no more than 8 core sets would be needed, or 7 for the lunar module. If it tried to start a task and there were no core sets available, you would get a 1202 executive overflow, no core sets. That could be the error. The Apollo guidance computer had, each core set had 12 words. Forget what they all were, but number 5 was a vector accumulation address, which was basically a memory location for doing calculations. There were 5 VACs for the calculations. Theory and tests confirmed you would never need more than 5, obviously. If a process required a VAC number available, you got an error 1201, executive overflow, no VAC errors. What happens after an error? The computer restarted. But MIT was smart. It dumped out all of its memory to a backup, and when it restarted, it read in everything up to when it crashed, and it read them in order according to their priority. So crucial tasks were restarted. This only took 2 seconds. And the AGC had 38K of memory. So here's the lunar module computer, and this is a schematic of it. And see here, this is the current program running, which is number 63. This is there's a verb and a noun system, haven't got time to go into that. And then there's the message number 1202. Obviously, someone's having a joke here because of the error. Now, just 11 days before the Apollo 11 launch, they had the Apollo 12 crew in the simulator. In the afternoon, it was the backup crew, Dave Scott and Jim Irwin. The simulation supervisor in NASA Ease is called Sensu, and in this case it was Dick Coos. And the guidance officer, Guido, was Steve Bales. Here he is, he's in charge of the lunar module. And the sim suit gave them case number 26, which had not been done before, and that was where the lunar module computer gave them an error 1201. That hadn't been done before. Now, this is from a very good documentary called Mission Control.
And we get this program alarm in the computer.
1201, 1202, you know, various, everybody's wondering what the heck is a 1201, 1202?
Program alarms was the computer's way of telling us, you're asking me to do too much.
They were very unfamiliar, at least to me.
I called my back room. Jack Armin was an expert at computer programs, and he didn't know. So I said, Flight, something is happening. I don't know what. Aboard.
In mission control, when we were at the mission rules, you need 2 cues to call on aboard. And that was when we started the debriefing. Simulation supervisor came in and said, well, you had 1 cue, what was your second one? And there was total dead silence in that room.
After the debriefing was over, Gene said, I want you to get that team together, and you tell me which alarms you're going to continue on and which ones you're not. So I said, Jack, you pull together MIT, people that built this computer, and anyone else you can. Come up with a list, brief me on it, and that's what we'll write as a rule. And that's exactly what Jack did.
Here are his notes. You can see the alarm code down here and the pre-menu capability and what they revised capabilities. It turned out that for Apollo, remember this was the Apollo 12 backup crew, it wasn't the Apollo 11 crew that they were training. But Jack Garman, who was in the back room, he would be there for the Apollo 11 landing. The Guido support would be Steve Bales, the same one who was there for the simulation, would be there for Apollo 11. So Apollo 11 would have basically the same team who'd just been through this training. And if you have a look carefully, you can see 1201, 1202, executive overflow VAC, executive overflow jobs, it's down here, would otherwise be cause for abort, probably aren't. That was what saved the mission. We'll skip the launch because you've seen that before. I can skip this and just go to the last little bit. Prior to starting the landing, Gene Kranz called all the flight controllers into the room, locked the door and said, whatever decision you make today, I will stand behind it 100%. We came in here as a team and we leave here as a team. In the next few hours, we either land on the moon, or we crash on the moon, or we abort the mission. There are no other outcomes. Are we ready for all three? Then let's go. It's a very impressive leader. Now this diagram explains why I never understood the video of the earliest part of the landing. The astronauts came in on their stomach facing the moon. The reason behind that is because Armstrong wanted to fly over known, recognisable landmarks on the moon so that they got a manual check on their speed and their location. Once they were convinced that they were where they should be, then the spacecraft rotates around and you see out the front, and that's the normal landing. Now there's different computer programs running here. Program 63 switches to 64 at this point, 64 for the final approach, 64 to 65. And there's also, which is where the computer does all the landing, basically, it's all computerised. 66 and 67 are also options. 66 is where the crew control the attitude and the computer controls the descent rate. And program 67 is full manual control, so they could take over if they needed to. And this is how that was done. This is where the command module, the lunar module, this is where the commander stands. Commander flies the lunar module, the lunar module pilot is on the other side. And there's a switch here for the descent rate up and down, and he's the prop. So we start off with the astronauts face down, and Armstrong is driving. The Capcom is Charlie Duke, who flew to the moon on Apollo 16.
Very much good. Eagle Houston, everything's looking good here, over. Roger, copy. Eagle Houston, after you're around angle S-band 6, -9, y'all plus 180. Copy.
Okay, so the next slide I'm going to show you is actually wrong. The first problem that they had was, you can hear the communications are very bad. And Gene Crane said he had to make a decision, do we go or no go based on the communication, and he concluded that it was barely okay, but if it didn't deteriorate, they would be able to make it. In fact, it got better, fortunately. So when I say this is the first problem, this is the second problem. That was a transfer between the lunar module and the command and service module. Wasn't fully depressurized, so there was a little kick given when they separated. And at high altitude, that little kick pushed the lunar module a lot further downrange than it should have been. By the time it got down low, it was high and fast, as an aircraft pilot would say. So that's why they missed where they were going to land.
Good radar data, altitude now 33,500 feet.
So remember, the Apollo 11 astronauts had no idea what a 1201 or 1202 alarm is, because that had never happened before. It was the Apollo 12 astronauts who were trained with the 1201 alarm. But fortunately, some of the same crew were in mission control. Now what had happened is the rendezvous radar was turned on when they separated to track the command and service module position. This was for safety, so that you knew where to go in the event of an abort, you could go immediately. That was normal procedure. But it caused the computer to overload. And of course, the first thing I asked is, why wasn't this found in the simulations? And it's because that system wasn't simulated. The switch was there in the simulator, but it was not connected to a radar, which then fed data back to the computer. So that's why it actually caused an overload. It was fixed on later missions, of course.
6 plus 25, throttle back, 25, throttle back. Roger, copy, 6 plus 25. We're still going to 27,000 feet. Naval alarm and interference to come off when we have a 1668 out. Roger, copy.
Okay, so that's a verb 16 and a noun 68, which I skipped the verb noun thing. So they're rather happy that everything seems to be working, even though they keep getting these errors. In fact, if you listen to the flight controls, Steve Bales says after the first 1201, he says, "We're okay. If we don't get another one, we're okay." They got 7, but they kept going anyway.
Velocity now 100 feet per second. Roger, stand by. You're looking great. 8 minutes. And correction on that velocity now reading 760 feet per second. It's the P-64. Good. Roger. Final set, we're go altitude 9,200 feet. 30, I'm looking great. Decelerating 129 feet per second. We copy. Eagle, you're looking great. Coming in 9 minutes. We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Altitude 5,200 feet. Manual altitude control good. Right, copy. Altitude 4,200 feet. Go for landing, over.
Actually, I was cruise I did recently, I was talking, there was a guy there who worked on the lunar module, and he said that the first thing he did as an intern at NASA was work on adding the 1 second delay for the time it takes a radio signal to get to and from the moon. And he said we couldn't imagine the 1 second delay was going to be critical, but we didn't want to find out afterwards that it was, so we put it in right from the start. They did that by recording everything that was said on one tape recorder, taking the output, running it 12 feet across the room to another tape recorder, so that they added the 1 second delay and doing the same thing back the other way, because it was all analog in those days. Now, behind the go, no-go, behind the go for landing comment, which was all you hear on the Capcom command, I'm now going to play the flight controls loop. And as I said, left and right channel are both coming through the same one, so you won't get that separation. But you'll hear them run through all of the controls, go, no-go. And there's also some 16mm film. There was someone running around mission control filming it. I think they thought that it might be a historic moment. So they were filming it, and some of that is synced up to the sound, but not all of it is. See it.
Okay, all flight controllers, go, no go for landing. Retro. Go. Fido. Go. Guidance. Go. Control. Go. Telcom. Go. GNC. Go. Ecom. Go. Surgeon. Go. Capcom. We're...
Don't know what happened to that. We'll try it again.
Okay, all flight controllers, go, no go for landing. Retro. Go. Fido. Go. Guidance. Go. Control. Go. Telcom. Go. GNC. Go. Surgeon. Go. Capcom. We're go for landing. Eagle, go for landing. Over.
Completely missing the appropriate channel. Sorry about that. I don't know why.
Go for landing. 3,000 feet. Top alarm. 1201. 1201. Rocket 1201 alarm. We're go. Think high. We're go.
Now again, this video, if you can hear it, for some reason one channel wasn't working here. Here you can hear the discussion about the 1201 alarm. You can hear the background saying it's the same one. Go.
1201. Rocket 1201.
Same type, we're go, flight. Okay, we're go.
We're go. Think high. We're go.
Flight Fido right on, real good.
2,000 feet. 2,000 feet. Into the air. 47 degrees. Roger. 2,000 feet. 2,000 feet. Into the air. 47 degrees. Roger. 47 degrees. Eagle looking great. Here go. Altitude 1,600. 1,400 feet. Still looking very good. Roger 1202. We got you. 35 degrees. 35 degrees. 750. Coming down at 23. 700 feet, 21 down, 33 degrees.
Okay, so the call-outs here, 700 feet, 21 down, means 700 feet above the surface, descending at 21 feet per second. Later you'll also get the forward speed in feet per second. The maximum vertical speed for a safe landing is 10 feet per second, and the maximum forward speed is 4. And of course Armstrong can see a lot of boulders because they're further downfield than they intended. So he entered program 66 so that he could control the direction manually.
100 feet down at 19. 540 feet down at 30, and at 15. And 400 feet down at 9. Stay forward. 10 and 50 feet down at 4. 30 with the half down. Tight down,
Note the calm way Aldrin said tipped over because it's got to be below 4 feet per second. So he immediately pitches backwards to slow it down.
7 feet down, 3.5, 47 forward. Hold up. 1 minute, 1.5 down. 70. Happy shadow up there. 50 down at 2.5. 19 forward. Altitude, velocity light. 3.5 down. 220 feet. 13 forward. Up forward, coming down nicely. 200 feet. 4.5 down. 5.5 down.
So the bingo call is a mandatory abort due to low fuel. They've used a whole lot more fuel than in any simulator because they had to fly over boulders. You don't have boulders in a simulator. And so mission control is counting down to when they have to do the abort. This is again from the documentary Mission Control.
He had to level off, then he had to fly horizontally to get over this boulder field. Well, that took a lot of extra gas.
As we kept going down, the low-level sensor tripped and said the fuel dropped below this point.
Now we're almost run out of gas.
Fuel critical.
I started the stopwatch. We're down at 100 G hovering, and I know how fast that uses fuel, and I know how many seconds are left.
I was giving a running commentary from Mission Control, and Deke Slayton was sitting to my right. He was Director of Flight Crew Operations, and he punched me in the side and said, "Shut up, Charlie, let him land."
On my stopwatch, I put a little piece of scotch tape and I said, okay, at this point now we'll have 60 seconds left. A little further, we've got 30 seconds left. And a little further, we got 0. We were set up so that the astronaut knew when you reached a point, either he's going to land or he's going to abort.
I'm convinced that within 100 feet of the moon, and I'd have called an abort, he would have continued his descent.
So you'll notice the lunar module's got probes hanging from 3 of the legs. This is a contact light, which when that hits the surface, it sends it ignites a light in the cockpit to tell them they're within 5 feet. Anyone got any ideas why it might only be on 3 of the 4 legs? Sorry? The ladder on the 4th one. They didn't want to run the chance of it bending and coming up and then rupturing the suit while you were climbing down. So they didn't put it on the 4th leg.
6.5 down, 5.5 down. 9 forward. Good. 20 feet. 100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. 5%. 185. 75 feet. That's looking good, down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds. Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. That's 40 feet down 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drifting to the right. Level. 20. Down a half. 30 seconds. Forward. 8. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. ACA at a descent. Host control both autos. Desconnection command override off. Engine arm off. Force 13 is in. We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
So about 30 seconds of fuel left. And this is the planned landing site, and they were 4 miles downrange and nearly 1 mile off to the side. It's a video showing you the landing, haven't got time for that. Now after the landing, there were 2 scheduled checks for an emergency departure. There was one 2 minutes after landing and one 8 minutes after, and then T3 was 2 hours later and the command module was overhead. So in this video you'll see an exuberant flight controller when they land, and he's immediately hushed by Dick Slate, and you'll see here Gene Kranz in the background saying, "Get ready for T1." Gene didn't have time to appreciate anything. He was always focused on the next stage to make sure everything happened safely.
Okay, engine stop. ACA has a descent. All control, no problems. Engine and command on the right off. Engine arm off. What's the thing is there?
We've had shutdown.
We copy it down, Eagle.
Okay, everybody in T1. Stand by for T1.
Okay, so now T1.
T1, normally you have a go, no-go decision, where go means proceed with the mission and no-go means do not proceed. So if you're considering leaving the moon, then go means don't go and no-go means go. They thought this may cause some confusion, so they changed the command to stay, no stay.
Okay, T1, stay, no stay. Retro. Stay. Fido. Stay. Guidance. Stay. Control. Stay. Calcom. Stay. GNC. Stay. Ecom. Stay. Surgeon. Stay. Capcom, we're stay for T1.
Sorry, that one channel is not working. I don't know why that is. Okay, I can skip the stuff on about the landing. We all know they landed, we all know they took off again. And I'll skip that because of time. So Apollo 11 splashed down again, and you'll notice here this is the mission control. Here is the Kennedy statement, and this says task accomplished July 1969. Again, Mike Collins, a short glass of ice, a guzzle guzzle of gin, a splash of vermouth. God, it's nice to be back. He's a man after my own heart. Now this is perhaps the ultimate anti-selfie. Every person who ever lived, except one, is in this photo. The one who's not in it is Mike Collins, who took the photo. So there's Earth and everyone who ever lived on it, and the only 3 people off the Earth are these 2, and Mike, who took the picture. Dick Coons, the Sinsuit who gave them the 1202, was rushing to mission control and he rolled his car. So he missed the Apollo 11 landing. The car was destroyed, but he wasn't, fortunately. The Apollo astronauts spent 3 weeks in quarantine with mice. The mice were fed ground grass to make sure that there was nothing dangerous about them. Mike Collins said that he was more felt closer to the mice than he did to the other astronauts. He said his future depended on the mice being well, he didn't care about the others. Again from his book, I'm not normally emotional about machines. I consider graffiti the exclusive province of morons and train stations. Despite all that, however, I feel a powerful urge to ride on Columbia somehow. Finally, on the second evening, I climbed back on board his chart carcass and on the wall of the low equipment bay, just above the sextant mound, I write, Spacecraft 107, Alice Apollo 11, Alice Columbia, the best ship to come down the line, God bless them, Mike Collins. So that's what I want to say about Apollo 11, but I'm not going to close without spending 5 minutes on Apollo 12. Apollo 12 was hit by lightning just after liftoff. Most people have forgotten if they knew that this happened to Apollo 12. Just to remind you, this was the Saturn V on top of its jet of flame, and you don't want to get hit by lightning when that happens, but it was.
I see 2 streaks of lightning there inside of the vehicle. Wow, the crew came alive.
All the data went blank.
While the console lights, somebody just lit up like a Christmas tree.
And I watched John. John just sit there, and I don't really talk to the back room.
I got 3 fuel cell lights and 8 fuel cell
All I'm going to have first is I'm going
charging burning 15 tonnes of fuel per second. But fortunately, John Aarons recognised this.
He just stared at the data, stared at the data. He says, John, talk to the back room. John, the word.
And all of a sudden, there was some patterns and stuff on the screen. I wasn't too sure at first what they were.
But then I said, I thought I've seen this.
I've seen this before.
And it turned out that he'd seen what the data would look like from the ground test, which he remembered. And that's when it clicked.
So, the ECOM, Electrical, Environmental and
Consumables Control was John Aaron, circle there, he was all 27, I think, the guy. And he recognised a pattern from a simulator. This is systems which should be signal. There's a signal conditioning equipment box which converts raw sensor data from all of the sensors in the spacecraft into signals to the displays. So it will convert something from some electrical thing in a fuel tank into a voltage or a pressure for us to read. And John Aaron realised that from a simulation that if it loses power, then you get this array of errors that they looking. But he also remembered that they had an auxiliary power supply. So he said to the flight director, asked them to set SCD to OX. And flight control told Capcom to do it. And here's the controls that I showed you before. This is a little button down here. See, this is SCD, norm, OX. So that little button down there is unstable.
And then John Aaron said, why? Tell him to go SCD to OX. SCD to OX. SCD to OX. Very impressive. What? What is that? John came over on top of both of us. Signal conditioning equipment to auxiliary.
He went to the spacecraft.
Helping give us each time just makes it get long. We get it all back.
We got it back, okay?
So a few minutes later, the communications were pretty interesting.
There's 3 parts that are pretty pleased to get through. Okay, let me just... Apollo 12 actually landed within 500 metres of the Survey 3. It's pretty impressive. We're able to go and recover some stuff from it. Apollo 13, I'll give you a talk on Apollo 13 another time. Mission Control is handed out one sheet medals at the end of each mission. Gene Crane's got 2. I've got one, of course, is a fire alarm making his ashtray at the wastepaper. And he got another one for locking the doors to Mission Control for controllers inside. And Gene Crane also says in his book, the greatest terror is not to have failed, it's to have tried and not given your best effort. And Gene Cernan said it's almost as if JFK reached out in the 21st century where we had a grabbed hold of a decade of time, stood neatly in the 60s and 70s and called it Apollo. And again, he finished with my comments. Perhaps my own involvement in Apollo 11 was we put too much emphasis on it. It seems to me the space program was too popular before the first landing and not popular enough after it. And so I'll end there and I'll volunteer to do Apollo 13 next time. Not this week.
Thank you, John. I'm sure that you're up for a few questions.
Sure.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, I'll take the first hand. Up the back, Darren.
Yeah, I was just looking at In the Shadow of the Moon, the documentary. Buzz Aldrin actually caused the 1202 by leaving the rendezvous radar and the landing radar both on. He kept it on because he was worried they'd have to get back quickly. So that's what he claims. I don't know if you know much more about that.
No, that's actually what I said. That was standard procedure, was to leave them both on.
Okay.
It just hadn't caused a problem because they weren't simulated in the simulator.
Yeah.
So it was standard procedure. Apparently, if you look into it in detail, there was also a mismatch in the phase, which should have meant that it was okay, but it actually wasn't. But the basic problem was that it wasn't simulated at all.
Okay, another question?
Take off some of them in the headset, so all the extra weight there. If they afford it, they were going to afford to pull that weight. Would that be possible?
Presumably yes, or it wouldn't have. They were. I know they were not keen on an abort. They were not keen on it for that reason. Of course, they wouldn't have the rocks. You know, so that would have made some difference. Yeah, yeah. In principle, they should have been able to do it, but they didn't want to.
I heard they threw their food wheel away or something.
Yeah. Yes, there are bags of feces on the moon. If you want some. Yeah. Long way to go for some.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, young man.
When that person caused the fire alarm to go off, did they think it was an active fire?
I guess so, temporarily, until they identified that it was just his.
Yes, Ken.
How much longer do you think Saturn V will be the most powerful rocket? Or will it always be the most powerful rocket and we'll just get smarter at what we do? Any opinion?
There is one planned at the moment, I don't remember what its name is, there is one planned at the moment that is more powerful than Saturn V. But at the moment there isn't anything that's more powerful. But there is one planned. I mean, it just depends how much you want to lift off per launch.
Well, that's why I thought we'll get smarter.
Well, the gravity doesn't depend. It doesn't matter how smart you are.
You need your bit.
Gravity's still there. Yeah, damn it.
There was a question. Yes?
What were the Russians doing halfway
They not very, I think, is the answer. They have one very powerful booster which had a 100% failure rate. I think they gave up after 3 or 4 attempts. They had a lunar module which was a copy of the American lunar module, and it had room for 1 astronaut. I don't think they got very close. They did a lot of unmanned stuff, which was much more successful. But they didn't. I don't think they really got very close.
Yes, question in front.
Just one. On the lander module, large cylindrical section, that kind of drum-looking thing, was that actually the fuel tank, or if not?
No, the fuel was the fuel for the ascent stage. I'm not sure where it was.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll have one more question.
Which country is going to be the next country to land on the moon?
I don't know. I don't know. And this guy had a question too. So.
The engine on the lunar module, the one that remained up in
Yeah. On the
how big was that in comparison to the Atlas?
I don't know.
Because it looks huge.
On the lunar module?
Yeah.
You mean compared to the service module? It's smaller than the service module. Because, but it was.
It was a different
Yeah,
engine.
yeah, and it was the one that brought Apollo 13 back. One of the problems with Apollo 13 was they didn't know when... Everything takes longer to explain than it should, and I'm already out of time. You send a rocket to the moon, the first thing you do is put it on a free return trajectory so that if everything fails, if all the engines fail, gravity will slingshot it around the moon and bring it back. Okay, it's called a free return. Apollo 13 was the first one that was not on a free return trajectory because where they wanted to land for scientific purposes couldn't have been on a free return. So they went on something that wasn't a free return, and then they were to adjust the landing when they got there. Of course, that was the one that blew up. So the first thing they had to do was put it on a free return trajectory. And they thought, well, do we fire the main engine to do that? In fact, they could have fired, they had a couple of abort times along the way where they could have fired the engine, burnt most of the fuel and brought it back within 1 day instead of going around the moon. But they decided not to do that because they didn't know whether the explosion had damaged the engine. So firing that engine could have just blown up the whole thing, or just as bad, if the engine was damaged and it just didn't work properly, it may have slowed them down just enough to crash into the moon. So rather than risk any of that, they used they went around the moon and they used the lunar module engine to do all the navigation, all the mid-course corrections. And Jim Lovell had to learn how to fly the whole thing. The lunar module was never designed to have a command and service module attached to it. And they had to do everything using the lunar module engine with 3 times the weight attached to it. So it was really quite an impressive thing.
All right, I think if you've got any other questions, John will be around for a short time afterwards. In appreciation, we'd like to thank John once more for a wonderful talk. His talks I always look forward to from the ASB, and we enjoy them immensely. So, on behalf of the ASB, John, I'd like to welcome you.
Thanks very much.
The rest of the night we'll have Sky for the Month, which Perry Vilas will present, after which we'll do the draw for the door prizes before we conclude with a few brief messages, and they will be brief, and then sum up. So, Perry.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Steve. Great talk, John. Thanks for explaining some of that terminology. Every time I watched the landing, I never know what all those things mean, so it's good to have an explanation. Perhaps, I don't know what you think, but I think the best evidence for anyone that thinks we didn't go to the moon is this. The whole of the space program was really one-upsmanship. It was East versus West, capitalism versus communism, and so getting to the moon was part of that. It was the Cold War. Now, I've mentioned this before, but some years ago, friends of mine were renovating a house, pulled up a whole lot of old newspapers from underneath the floor. One of them was the front page of either The Age or The Herald or something. And for those that are too young to know, The Herald and The Sun were separate newspapers in those days, so we used to have 3. But anyhow, on the front page it was man lands on the moon, blah, 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 all the way down to this little panel at the bottom, which there was a little bit written that said the Russians have a satellite in orbit around the moon, and they were going to lower its trajectory to have a look and see what the Americans were doing. Now, I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if the Russians had the Americans really weren't on the moon, it would have been news on the next day's newspaper all over the world. They would have taken great pleasure in telling everyone what lying bees those Americans were, and they were nowhere near the moon. But
that's if you believe the Russians were there.
Sorry?
That's if you believe the Russians were there.
But what did they do? They congratulated the Americans on on reaching the moon. So that's the best evidence for believing that we did go to the moon. But now, before I get started on Sky for the Month, well, it is part of Sky for the Month, something bizarre has been going on in the sky. Hasn't happened for a long time. In fact, it's more bizarre than Steve Paddy wearing a tie and a suit. Doesn't happen.
That'll be the day.
Exactly. A very well-known supergiant star has been dimming and getting fainter and fainter. Certainly no one in this room has lived long enough to have been able to see it as faint as this. So nobody alive has seen Betelgeuse, which is this. If you're looking at the saucepan of Orion, the red supergiant under the saucepan, heating it up, if you like, Rigel above. Well, it's the red supergiant which has been getting fainter and fainter. Some people are alarmed that it might be the forebearer to its going supernova. John likes to study big fat red supergiants. What's your opinion, dude?
No, I like red giants, not supergiant. But I don't know.
No?
Too early to tell.
Isn't that what Mao said about the effects of the French Revolution on modern society? So, as you can see here, Betelgeuse, there's... where's my...
Here you go.
You call that a pointer? This is a pointer.
Oh, God, unbelievable.
So, Betelgeuse is down here. There's the saucepan. Above the saucepan, the bright star is Rigel. Now, this is an unusual case where the second brightest star in the constellation most of the time has been given the designation of Alpha, and Rigel up here is Beta. So the reason that Betelgeuse gets the Alpha designation is because its magnitude, its brightness is variable. It means it can get sometimes it's at a certain brightness, then it fades, then it goes back up, fades, goes back up. It's semi-regular, in other words, it's not totally predictable, and it has two cycles. One which goes for 420 days, from brightest to highest to lowest brightness and back again. And the secondary cycle, which is much longer, it goes for 5.9 years. What is thought to be causing this latest dimming, and we're not quite sure for how long it will continue to dim and how much dimmer it will get, but they think it's a combination of both of these cycles coinciding and being a little bit deeper than what they've seen in the past. Now, if we can zoom out, please, Ken, stop there. You can go out there and track its progress as to how much fainter it is getting. Because Betelgeuse down here varies between magnitude 0 and magnitude plus 1.3. Now, magnitudes work a little bit like a golf course, a golf score. So if you've ever played golf, how many people here play golf? Let's see a show of hands. Right. Okay, not too many. You that could be true. So, the lower the score is in golf, the better you've done. So you can say the winner of a golf tournament is the brightest scorer. And the same here. If you've got a brightness score of 1, you're pretty bright, 2, you're dimmer, 3, dimmer still, 4, and so forth. So, this star here, Bellatrix, is normally quite a bit fainter than Betelgeuse. This star over here, Aldebaran, part of Taurus, is not quite as bright either. So what you need to do is to go out there and compare which of the 3 is brighter, and you can have your brightest up here, Rigel, which is pretty steady, doesn't vary. You can have that as the brightest element, and the others to be able to check where it is at its faintest. You can look them up, you can Google them, you can get the brightnesses of them, and you can actually check it for yourself. Alright, that's all I'm going to say because time's running out and we've got a telescope to give away and binoculars. And telescopes are extremely important for survival. Aren't they? You've got to have a telescope. The dinosaurs didn't have telescopes and look what happened to them. So having a telescope is great. We will make the draw after the announcements. Okay. So, I was going to take you outside and show you these stars in the real sky, but unfortunately it's cloudy, so this will have to do. Look for the 3 stars in a line, which are the belt stars, bottom of the saucepan. One side goes to there, another one there, there's the handle. Brightest star in the sky is this one, Sirius, and then Betelgeuse, Rigel, Aldebaran. If you've got a particularly dark sky in the city, try looking for the Pleiades as well, the 7 sisters. Thank you for your attention.
Library report. Ken, can you bring the library report up and then move on to just the other announcements and we'll just follow them through.
Just a very brief library report. By the way, too, we'll be going to the library after the meeting. John and I will take you there. I'll make an announcement when we do that. These are the, there's 13 at least DVD sets in the library on Apollo and Moon missions. They are there. And the last 2 are not going into the library until February. Right. And the next page, if you've got it there, shows some of the books in the library. For instance, one it's not shown because when I prepared this, it was based on something earlier, and it was mentioned in the film that Carrying the Fire by Night Collins, got that in the library, of course, and other ones as well. We're running out of time, aren't we? Fascinating to listen to you, John. I know John very well from Monash. How are you? Yeah, it's always fascinating. It's very complicated control of Apollo 11, the show. They're very hard, not easy to follow. Fascinating. But thanks very much, John, for that presentation. And I'll make an announcement when we go to the library after that summer. Thanks.
Okay, now we're going to do the door prize draw. Saxon to donate these wonderful prizes for us. There's one for members, which is the telescope, an 8-inch Dobsonian, which anyone would be proud to use and have and own. And there's a set of lovely binoculars for visitors. Perry, would you do the honours, because you've done all the work.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to watch and see how easy it is to move that telescope. Even a young boy like Blake can carry. Oh, that's all right. His father is doing the whole thing. So, first of all, the binoculars, and they come in a nice pack. Let's see, do we have someone young? Michelle, send your daughter up here, please. Up here. What's your name again? Ashley, come on up here. Go around the side.
You're not allowed to draw your own ticket.
Right, Ashley, close your eyes. Okay. All right, move it around. Just pull out C29.
Here we go.
For the binoculars, blue ticket, B number 23. Who's got that? Not that I don't trust you. What's your name? Subhadra, congratulations. Here are your binoculars.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, ready for this one, Ashley? In there, dig in. Okay.
Watch his hands.
What is that?
Can I have a second opinion, Mr. President? Okay. First of all, big hand for Ashley. It is green ticket D number 029. 29. Ashley, you were 2 off mine. You didn't do a good enough job. Number 29. Who's got it?
Green ticket, 29.
D 29.
Green.
Green. Green is the colour. Barry, is that yours?
D.
D.
Oh, Barry.
It's Barry.
Ben gets to give it to.
Correct. Congratulations. Congratulations, Barry. You guys, let's go to the next row.
Thank you very much. All I can say is that I have 4 grandkids.
Very good. You need 3 more.
Thank you, Barry. Just a couple of words on the generosity of Saxon. They've given us a number of these instruments over the years, so we like to give them a bit of a plug. Saxon are as good as any other brand. In fact, most of these telescopes are all made in the same factory in China with just different names on them. So there's not much difference, but people that have used them and the ASB uses them, and they all are very satisfied with them. Thank you. I'll hand you back to the President. Steve, all yours. Thank you, Greg.
We're just about to close the meeting and move into supper. Could we have any volunteers to come and help out by moving food in and helping out with serving tea and coffee? If you'd like to come out. Thanks, Frank. Alright, that concludes our business and our meeting tonight. Hope that you enjoyed the talk and have a wonderful and safe